Couple more concepts that we need to talk about when we're talking about sleep. One being sleep deprivation. Now, as a teenager, you guys need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep. If you're getting less than that, you are sleep deprived. When you are operating on fewer hours than what your body biologically needs, you are going to be at risk for what's called REM rebound, meaning that if the sleep deprivation is profound enough, eventually when you do go to sleep, you're going to immediately go into a dream state. You will skip out on some of that really needed delta wave sleep, and that becomes problematic. When we get into some of the other things like sleep disorders, know that insomnia is the inability to stay asleep or the inability to fall asleep and stay asleep. With insomnia, the recommended treatment for that is to have somebody only lay in a bed when they intend to go to sleep, to keep very regimented sleep hours, and to basically stop any consumption of things like caffeine or any stimulants any later than roughly about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you should have a general idea of how you would treat insomnia. Sleepwalking or somnambulism, that is going to be a delta wave disorder. So it cannot happen during dream state. So if a person is dreaming and walking, they are not dealing with somnambulism. They're dealing with some sort of REM disorder. Sleepwalking happens during delta wave sleep. Wake them up. Narcolepsy. This is the idea that somebody may just become very tired and fall asleep uncontrollably. Usually it's going to be signaled by a bout of stress, or the person will kind of feel it coming on. Sleep apnea. This is going to be when someone stops breathing during sleep, and will cause them to wake up roughly anywhere from maybe 50 to a couple hundreds of times at night. So they never really get into delta wave sleep, which is why they're usually very exhausted. And then the last one, night terrors, that also happens during delta wave sleep. This is when it's usually going to be in children. They have extreme panic and terror. This is not a nightmare. It's not happening during REM sleep. It's not a bad storyline. This legitimately is just the kind of extent of pure terror coming off of the child. Okay, so we've talked about that. Let's talk a little bit about hypnosis, then we'll get into dreams. So hypnosis, this has to do with your ability to become absorbed into kind of whatever you're focusing on. So it is still a divided state of consciousness you're not fully aware of. So absorption is kind of the key to that. Mesmer, or the idea to mesmerize. Mesmer was going to be the person who came up with the process of hypnosis. Hilgard is going to be the person noted for the hidden observer. And the hidden observer is really kind of the big thing that people will talk about when we talk about hypnosis, if it gets talked about at all. So this is the entire divided consciousness theory of hypnosis, that when you get hypnotized, the person who is easily absorbed, someone who is fantasy prone, someone who can go and daydream rather easily, has nothing to do with IQ level. It just happens to deal more often with people who can kind of let go and not maintain control, that can kind of believe in the fantastic and kind of daydream about what's going on around them. Those people are more likely to be hypnotized. When you are hypnotized, according to Hilgard, the part of you that is the conscious, kind of dedicated, aware part, that part is going to go kind of almost to the back of your mind. It's still there. It's still watching what's going on. It will prevent you from doing anything that you wouldn't normally do, but it's not in the driver's seat. That in the driver's seat is this other part of you that is dissociated. It's willing to kind of engage in behaviors that you might not otherwise necessarily do. It kind of lowers inhibition. You are still fully aware of what you're doing, and you still have the complete ability to stop any behaviors when you are hypnotized. During hypnosis, you can get a post-hypnotic suggestion. That means that after the hypnosis, you don't remember this, but you may no longer want to smoke, or you may no longer want to engage in eating some of your favorite foods. Post-hypnotic suggestions only work if you actually want them to work. So if you have someone who's a smoker who wants to keep smoking, and you give them the post-hypnotic suggestion that every time they hold a cigarette, it's gonna, hurt their hand, or that it's going to taste like ash anytime they taste it, that's not going to work if they don't want it to work. You can also have post-hypnotic amnesia, where they don't remember what happened while they were under the hypnosis. But again, this has to be something they're willing to engage in, because they can choose not to have this happen. Hypnosis is a real thing. It is not real in the sense that television and movies have made it out to be, but it is in fact a true method for therapy. It does have some properties that make it beneficial for people. It's essentially meditation that's guided by somebody else. else. So self-meditation also is another form of hypnosis. All right, so the questions of why do we sleep, why do we dream? Sleep, the idea that it might be restorative, that it may also be protective. We sleep during the night hours because we are not nocturnal. Why do we dream? Freud, you would need to look at manifest versus latent content. Now, we talked about that when we talked briefly about his manifest and latent content when we talked about personality theory. Manifest content of dreams, literally what the dream is. Latent content, that is the unintended message that comes with it. Activation synthesis theory, which is my favorite one, is basically the theory and one of the more commonly held theories that says basically when we're asleep and we're going through REM state, our brain is firing randomly. And since our brain doesn't like inconsistencies, it takes all of this random firing and it puts it or synthesizes it to a single storyline. So while the brain is very active, it synthesizes all of the information into one story and that becomes your dream. Memory consolidation. This is legitimate memory consolidation. It will, anything that you've been thinking about or has been heavily repeated during your daily activity will get consolidated. In other words, during your dream state and during your non-REM, any of those things that are important, your brain will strengthen. That also means that any of the things that you haven't reviewed, stressed out about, or paid attention to, they get broken. And then dreams as problem solving, also a legitimate theory. Sometimes people will tell you to sleep on it. The answer may come to you. Well, that's because your brain does work on some of your problems while you're sleeping, but it's also because your brain is aware that those are things that you've usually been concentrating on or stressed out about. So it may come to the solution and it will continue to work on the problem while you are unconscious. Why do we forget our dreams? Well, there's the repression theory from Freud. We all know that repression isn't real. So let's just skip that. If you remember the defense mechanism of repression, you got that one. The salience hypothesis might be because it doesn't mean anything. So you had a dream about going to the grocery store. Whoop-de-doo, it's not salient, it's not personally meaningful. There's nothing really great about that, so it's not worth remembering. The interference hypothesis. When you wake up, usually you are going to the bathroom, getting a drink of water, getting ready for your school day, doing something else. And so basically other things interfere with it and therefore later you don't remember it because what you remember is what you had to do when you got up. And you may at best have kind of a hazy sensation of the dream, but you weren't paying attention to it and other things interfered with it. And then it can just be this idea that it might be cortical. So stress can impact it, but also the fact that you just may not care. All right, last little bit. Psychoactive drugs. Anything that is a psychoactive drug is a drug that activates on your brain. Psycho, brain, active, activates on brain drugs. There we go. Got it. You should know what addiction is. It can be physiological or it can be psychological. Physiological addiction, the body becomes used to the drug and requires it. Psychological addiction, you believe that you must need it to function in some fashion. Tolerance. As you take a drug, you will build tolerance. In other words, you'll need more and more of the drug to get the original response that you had to the drug. The only drug that violates the tolerance rule is marijuana. You actually, through consistent use, may need less and less of the drug to get the same high. Now, withdrawal with repeated use, if you terminate the drug, you will actually get kind of the opposite effect of whatever the drug is. So if it is something like caffeine, which is a stimulant, you may start to get headaches, you might start to feel lethargic and tired, etc., etc. So withdrawal is all the negative symptoms associated with the stopping of or the discontinued use of a drug. The major classes that you need to know: depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. Now, chances are you're going to get a question about either alcohol, nicotine, or caffeine because those are our three major and most commonly used psychoactive drugs. So for depressants, alcohol is always a depressant. What it does is it slows down neural functioning in the brain. So people may get a little more expressive and tell you their opinions, or they may want to dance or blah, 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 blah. But essentially all that is it is the brain depressing the frontal lobe. It's the brain depressing inhibition. It's slowing down and kind of terminating it. Tranquilizers and barbiturates, those are also going to be depressants. They are going to essentially slow down functioning. And then opiates, those are going to be morphine, heroin, codeine, any of those. Those you need to know in the fact that opiates are going to replace the endorphins that the brain normally produces. And that's going to be the big thing for opiates. But again, it'll give you a feeling of euphoria. It's going to often make you very tired. It's a painkiller. Stimulants: cocaine, caffeine, nicotine, and amphetamines. Big ones here, caffeine and nicotine. Caffeine is going to be a majorly used stimulant. You can still have withdrawal symptoms from caffeine and nicotine. Big one. The thing with nicotine is you should know how it impacts fetal development, but outside of that, it is a stimulant. Hallucinogens, LSD, PCP, MDMA, also considered horse tranquilizers, and then marijuana. Marijuana has a little asterisk there because this one is kind of its own unique drug. It's not technically a hallucinogen. It has a little bit of a depressant quality, et cetera, et cetera. But again, hallucinogens cause false sensory experiences. Just know that LSD, PCP, MDMA, and marijuana can cause you to have a false sensory experience, which is a hallucination. We talked about withdrawal here, we talked about tolerance, and we talked about physical and psychological addiction. Near-death experiences, I have never seen them on the AP exam. They pop up in your book in the idea of dualism and monism. Monism is that the mind and the body are the same, the soul, it's all one. Dualism, that the mind, soul, body are two separate things. So when you die, your soul separates from your body and you have two different experiences. That should be everything that you need to know for drugs, for other altered states of consciousness. And again, you may get 2 to 4 questions on this. So this would be one of those things that you should just have a general understanding of the concepts involved.